Now my next video was going to be about building a raised bed, or raised beds in general, but when I went back to review the footage I learned that the birds were too loud, and so you couldn't hear me over the birds. So we're just going to move on. I don't feel like making another raised bed, and maybe I'll learn how to do a voiceover later on, and we can reuse that footage later. So today what I'm going to be doing is thinning my lettuce and my spinach and my carrots and planting some potatoes in grow bags, which I'm very excited about. I've never grown potatoes before, so I should make lots of really interesting mistakes for you. The reason I'm going to be growing the potatoes in grow bags is just because I don't have any garden space prepared for them right now, and I really want to get them in before things warm up too much. I understand you need to plant potatoes earlier in the season for best results. That may be a misunderstanding. So let's thin this bed, and so I'm going to move the camera in so you see less of me and more of the the garden stuff that you actually came for, and we will move on from there. This is black-seeded Simpson. So the reason I went with that is it is adaptable to a wide range of climates. My personal experience is that it doesn't do as well in the really cold as my devil's ear does, but it does well enough that I quite enjoy it. And I had some bad luck seeding lettuce in the summer last year for fall harvest, and because of that I wound up going really heavy with my seeds in the bed, and that resulted in a very wasteful expenditure of seed beyond what I needed to do. You only really need to wind up spacing this out about once every 4 to 6 inches, and as you can see I've got a lot more plants than that in here. I blame the oak leaf lettuce, which did not grow. So I'm going to go ahead and thin this to, I'm going to start with 4 inches. I can probably go to 6 because it gets a little bigger, but that is kind of boring, so we're going to not do all that while you watch. In this row, where you can see there's almost nothing growing, this was supposed to be an oak leaf lettuce variety or a carrot. I'm not sure which. As you can tell, nothing grew here, so there's nothing for me to thin. That's okay. This is where I'm going to be planting tomatoes later in the season. And then here we have, those are definitely onions coming up. I'm not going to thin the onions because they're not that bad spacing wise, and as they grow, if I need to create more room, I can just pull those out and eat them as green onions. So for bulb onions you want to space them at least 4 to 6 inches from each other, but since some of these can just end their lives as green onions, that's really not necessary. So these are yellow sweet Spanish onions, which I read were easiest to grow, and since this is my first season growing onions, that's what I went with. Alright, here you can see 2 rows of lettuce, 1 row of spinach, and maybe off at the edge another row of carrots. Let's see, this whole row is red velvet lettuce, and it is an attractive variety I'm trying for the first time. It's supposed to be slow to volt. I'm going to thin this initially to about 4 inches, and if I need to thin it further I can by eating it, which is exciting. In the back here I've planted devil's ear lettuce, which has got to be one of my favorite lettuce varieties. I've found that it's both heat and cold tolerant, and it's slow to bolt. In fact, it's performed better for me than any other kind of lettuce. Unfortunately, what that means is that I used up all my seeds, so the rest of this row is more red velvet. This is my spinach. I think I need to thin that to 4 to 6 inches also, so I'm just going to take it to 4 and go from there. And the carrots, I understand, need to be thinned to once every 2 inches, and you want to cut them or pinch them off. You don't want to pull them up because you can disturb the other roots. I don't know what type of spinach this is. It's the only one I've got, so I just labeled it spinach. So sorry about that. At the far right, you should see another row of carrots. Then here we've got the more onions. This is Merlot lettuce. It should have the reddest leaves of all the lettuces that I'm growing. And I picked this variety for color, not for any, rational reasons like, oh, it's soda volt, or it's heat tolerant, or it's cold tolerant. So we'll see how it does, and if it does well, I'm going to grow it again because it's gorgeous. And then over here, this last row, that's almost not a row, this is oak leaf lettuce. So if you see how sparse it is, that will help you understand why I oversowed the other rows. Now in this situation, I could just as easily have block planted instead of planting in rows because this is a raised bed and I don't need room to walk. The reason I did rows is just because it's neat, it looks more tidy. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and thin these so you don't have to watch the boring stuff, and then I'll show you the bed when I'm done. Alright, I've thinned these down to about 1 inch or 2 distance from one another. I'm hoping that I'll be able to make up a little bit for how densely I planted my seeds by taking advantage of some baby lettuce and baby spinach next time I thin. So that'll hopefully help make up for some of my wasted seed. You can see everything's spaced quite a bit further apart. And that is that chore done. I've also gone through and weeded my other beds where I'm growing lettuce and spinach because I made this mistake all over my garden, and it was actually a really time-consuming process to get that thinned out. So if you're thinking of planting extra seed, just remember that you're going to have to thin that. So in addition to costing you that extra money on the seeds, you're going to end up spending a lot of extra time. It turns out that 30-gallon grow bags are, well, they contain a 30-gallon volume, which is much bigger in reality than it was when I was picturing it when I ordered the product. So each of these pretty massive things is going to get 2 seed potatoes in it. And unfortunately that would be a huge investment in potting mix if I were to use straight potting mix. And instead what I'm going to do is mix it with some of my native soil. There's a big clod right there. Woo! And so that way I'll get a nice percentage of organic material without spending quite as much money. The soil I'm using from my yard is part of a big pile that we generated when we dug up some of the lawn. It's actually pretty good because we got a lot of organic material just from the lawn that we dug up. I'm going to go ahead and mix this up. I have 5 of these grow bags to fill. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to lay down about 4 inches of this mixture in the bottom of the bag. I'm going to lay my seed potatoes on top, and then I'm going to cover it with another about 4 inches of material. And that should be enough until it's time to hill up. So for ease and convenience, you're going to want to roll down the sides of your grow bag. And I think you can see that mess behind me as well. So my tomato seedlings are not getting enough light in my south-facing window just because of the angle of the sun at our latitude this time of year. So it's too cold outside to have them out permanently, but it's too dim inside to have them inside permanently. So I've just grabbed my little frame with my felt, fleece, my agricultural fleece. I've grabbed my frame and laid it over my cold frame that's got the tomato seedlings in it to protect them from drying out. And the fleece blocks about 30% of the sunlight, so that should be a lot more gentle on them, and hopefully I'm going to avoid some sun scald while upping their amount of daily sunlight. So that is my goal. Now, since this is wild soil, I am going to have to weed my potatoes. And that's worth the money I'm going to save by not spending more on potting mix. I'm going to do this 5 times for the 5 grow bags, but I'm only going to make you sit and watch me do it once because it's engaging while you're doing it, but probably not so much while you're watching. This is a good amount of soil. It should drain well and have a good amount of organic material in it. Alright, now these seed potatoes are Yukon Gold, and you can grow potatoes from seed if you want to. They flower and they set seed, but you won't be guaranteed to get the same variety of potato growing from your seeds as you collected the seeds from. So, alright, and because I've got 10 seed potatoes and 5 grow bags, I'm just going to use these whole. You're going to want to find the side with the most eyes on it. Just lay it down where it's going to go. I'll just kind of put them on opposite sides of the bag. This should be plenty roomy. And then I'll go ahead and fill this up some more. I'll show you when it's done. And I have this height again to hill up as my plants grow up, and that should give me plenty of space for the potatoes to be easy to pull up and reach and get me some tubers. Hopefully, so this is about 1 pound of seed potatoes, so I should get at least 20 pounds of tubers from it. But my accommodations are spacious enough. I'm hoping to get more. Now, it's not an uncommon problem to have more space than you have seed potatoes, at which point, in which case you can divide your seed potatoes at least in half if they've got a diameter greater than 2 inches. You want to be careful not to plant them too early in the season. I've looked ahead in the weather forecast and verified that I'm not going to get freezing temperatures for at least the next week or so. Once your seedlings are up, those will be frost tender somewhat. The roots and the tubers should be fine in their soil, but you're going to want to protect the seedlings. My plan is, if I get a frost later on, which is quite likely in my climate, I can roll the sides up and kind of cinch them closed and create a little protective dome for my seedlings, little felt dome overnight, which will hopefully be sufficient. Things you can do that are better than what I just did. There's a process called greening, where you find the side of your potato that is most full of eyes. You set it up in a bright spot until the eyes actually start to grow, and then you then you can plant them. If you're going to green, make sure you green before you divide your tubers, if you're going to divide your tubers. So get your potato greened, then divide, and now there are conflicting stories about what you ought to do after you've divided your tuber. Do you give it 2 days to a week to callus over, or do you just throw it straight in your soil? The answer to that question is more complicated than a yes or no, or an A or B. If you are planting a little bit later in the season when you expect things to stay warm and your potato is going to take off and grow right away, you may not need to callus your potato. If you're planting them fairly early in the season and it's likely to be slowed down by frosts and moisture, then you're probably better off callusing your potato. So that's a choice that you make, and one that I'm happy to sidestep by having 5 grow bags and 10 seed potatoes. So if you want to avoid that whole issue, just plant your seed potatoes whole and make sure they're at least 2 inches in diameter before you divide them. And make sure each part has at least 2 or 3 eyes on it, or else all you've done is made a smaller seed potato and some potato that, I don't know, eat it, something, compost it. If it doesn't have eyes, you won't get plants. So I'm going to do this 5 more times, then I'm going to show you all of it done, because that is the magic of YouTube and I guess television, but who watches that anymore? Alright, once your potatoes are all in bed, you're going to want to go ahead and water them in. I'm going to give these a good long soak because I know that these grow bags are going to give me some really good drainage, so I don't need to worry about drowning my potatoes in these bags. So that's kind of nice. I also mixed a little bit too much of the soil, so what that's going to do is go in that bed to sit there until I get it ready for crops. Now, did I need to mix my regular soil in with the potting mix or the general purpose mix from the store? No, I did not. I could have just used plain soil. This was good enough soil that I could have used it as is, or I could have mixed it with compost that I made myself at home and used that. I've just never done potatoes before, and I'm not sure how important it is to keep the soil from compacting around the potatoes underneath where you're going to hill up. So I wanted to make sure that everything stayed nice and loose for my developing potatoes. This isn't exactly even. That's okay unless you have OCD, in which case there's nothing wrong with that. Now, if you try this at home, I would recommend filling your grow bags where you want to have them once they're full, because even a third of the way full, a 30-gallon grow bag full of soil is really quite heavy. As I've been watering this in, I see that in this bag at least one of my potatoes wound up exposed, so that I did not have enough soil on top, and it's a good thing I have extra soil. Those of you who are veteran gardeners know that there's no such thing as extra soil, and I understand if you winced every time I said that. Well, that's about all I'm going to do today. Thanks for watching, and I hope your garden grows very well this season. I will see you next time.